Hi there, folks. My name is Arthur, and today we're going to build a customer feedback survey app. The app is a conversational AI app, which means that it conducts conversations automatically through a telephone connection in this case. So the use case is basically the AI calls a customer, asks them whether they enjoyed the service, asks them to rate the service from 0 to 10, and then asks for additional feedback if the additional feedback is required based on the ratings received. So pretty straightforward. Um, all right, so let's go over the conversation map. The speaker is column A, the node name is column B. So a node is a single point in the conversation where the AI says something and it gets some response back, and then from which it progresses to another node based on the user's intent. So we're thinking about what type of intent we expect. We're thinking about where to transition to, and what types of variables come into play in that particular node. So we are going to refer back to the conversation map throughout the process. Very, very basic, perfect workflow. So the AI is calling on behalf of a credit union, asking if for permission to ask a few questions, and then if permission granted, it asks question one, then it asks question two, question three, and so on, and then it asks the last question. So for example, if for question one we get a negative response, we want to check what the customer did not enjoy. We want to collect that feedback and we want to store it so that it can be served up to wherever you may use this data. So again, this is just a demo app. We're also planning some digressions. So what are digressions? So for example, like if I started telling you about the weather here now, which is it's pretty rainy, but I guess it just got better like an hour ago, that would be a digression, like a tangent. Digressions are essential to maintaining that human-like effect, but also they can be used in other ways as well. For example, if you've got a app where you expect to have a lot of optional responses from the user, for example, how can I help you today? And it's like a hotel front desk, and there can be, I don't know, 24 questions that the user can ask. Then you would address those with digressions. But we're not really going there today. We're just doing a couple of digressions as examples. All right, well, let's begin. So the first thing you'll want to do is obviously to have Visual Studio Code installed, latest version. Ideally, you want to have Node.js installed and you want to have NPM installed as well. In Visual Studio Code, you would go to the extensions and you would search for Dasha Studio extension. There it is. Download it. I will install it. I already got it installed, so I'm not doing that. And then the second thing you'll want to do is you will want to install the Dasha command line interface. So to do that, you would enter this particular command, npm i-g -aicli. So I've already got it installed, so I'm not doing that again. Now that we've got everything up, we need to load up some basic app from which to start building. So if you go to, again, all of these links are going to be in the comments, or sorry, in the video descriptions. Go to Dasha Samples blank slate app, and you will want to clone it either using the GitHub command line interface or download it and open it up in your Visual Studio Code. I've already got it opened up. So there we go. Let's get started. What have we got here? This is a pretty simple app. There is a this is our area where we declare variables for context. We declare input variables, so it takes inputs of a phone number to which to make the call. It takes the input of name, so that's like the username, how the user is addressed, And we've got a external function declared, which I don't think is used anywhere in the body of the conversation, but it's still there, I guess, as an example. So we've got the start node root, and we do some actions in this node. So we wait for the connection. Once the connection is established, we wait for speech for 1,000 milliseconds. If we don't hear speech, we say, when I say we, I mean the AI. The AI says some form of greeting. So the greeting, if you see a function that's hashtag say and then greeting, that's going to be referring to the phrase map. So go into the phrase map, phrases, greeting. You've got, first time that we hit this node, we say, hi there, name, can you hear me? If for some reason we come back to this node, uh, for example, if upon saying, hi there, can you hear me? A digression gets called up. For example, I say, hey, how are you? The AI is going to respond to that, and then it's going to go back to the previous node, and the second optional phrase, the repeat phrase, will be used. So the AI will say, I was just saying, can you hear me? Name, question mark. All right, so pretty straightforward. What we're doing here is the Dasha is asking, hey, can you hear me? And then if it catches a yes, it says, great, bye. If it catches a no, it says, not good, bye. So let's run a quick test just to make sure that the app that you downloaded works. You generally will want to do that because you want to start making changes to an application source code if you know that the app already works. So to do that, we would npm start chat. Oh, sorry, I forgot to input the name. Npm start chat Arthur. Npm starts chat starts the conversation via chat. I usually use chat when I'm just testing the apps. Yes, I can hear you. Great, good job. If you wanted to do a phone call, this is what you would do.
Can you hear me?
No.
Like you responded to me and I can hear you just fine. Peace out.
Oh, so she's a little upset with me saying that I can't hear her. All right, so it works. Perfect. Let's get started building our amazing customer feedback survey application. So we've got a few nodes that we need to build first. Node root, where we're asking whether the user has a few minutes to answer some questions. So it looks like we can repurpose this node root for it. So I'm working on a small monitor today. I'm working on a temporary setup. So let me just toggle word wrap here. That's better. All right, so what do we want to do in this node? We want to ask a question. Hey, you visited our office. Can you talk? So let's go to the phrase map, go to the greeting and say, hi, name, hi, first name. You visited, let's put a space here, visited our Acme Bank offices. Sorry, was it Acme Credit Union offices today? Actually, the smarter thing to do would be to just copy this text that I have designed just for this purpose. Beautiful. All right. And we need to have a second optional text in which in case we come back to this node. So let's do, I was just saying, John, I was just saying, Arthur, do you have 2 minutes to answer some questions about your experience at Acme today? Hi, name. This is Dasha with Acme Credit Union. You visited one of our offices today. I'd like to ask you a few questions about the experience. Do you have a few minutes now? All right. So that's the greeting. That's node root. And then we wait. So we're waiting for a yes or for a no. So in case we get a yes, we move on to question 1. So obviously transition, we name the transition here, and we name the node here, and we name the intent here. So intent is one thing that we haven't talked about. Intent. I will prefer to rename this file to data.json versus intents.json. There is a good reason for it, because in this file, we provide training data for the neural networks to properly interpret out the intent of the meaning of the words, that the meaning that the user puts in their words. But that's not the only thing we do. We also train it to recognize named entities. So for example, in this case, we've got named entities of a rating of 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So really calling this file intent isn't proper, I suppose, because we are doing more than just intent in this file. We're doing training data. So let's, if we change the file name here, we need to go back to this file nps.dasha-app, or whatever .dasha-app, and we need to change the file name, the custom intents file name, to data.json. All right, so that was a bit of a digression. Going back to what we were doing, we have gone into data to look at the intents for yes and for no. I like to define my own intent because that gives me a lot more control, because there are different ways of saying yes and no. So if I'm asking you, could you, you might answer, I could, and that would be a yes. So obviously, you don't have to specify every single phrase that can come out of the user to signify a specific intent. You can just provide some examples, and that would be considered enough. You can provide also includes, what are called includes, which is essentially where you state a sentence and then you state where in that sentence the intent would go. So in the case that the AI hears something that is not included in a data set, it would be able to recognize it. So on transition, on intent, yes, the transition yes is activated, and we go to node question 1. On transition, on intent no, the transition no is activated, and we go to the node, I suppose, callback, right? Yeah, node callback. All right, so now we need to create these 2 nodes. I want to start with the node callback simply because it's kind of a standalone node. The conversation ends there. And then we can go back to the question 1 nodes, etc., and go to question 2, etc., etc., etc. So to create the node callback, what I would do is I would just copy this node, for example, paste it in, say node callback. And on node callback, I'm going to delete all of these comments here. On node callback, we don't need to wait for a connection. We don't need to wait for speech. We just say, we do need to create a new phrase. So let's just copy this one here and say callback. Great. I'll call you later. Bye. We could do a little workflow where we ask when to call back, but I don't want this tutorial to become exceedingly too long. So with the stuff that we do in the rest of this tutorial, you'll be able to execute that workflow on your own, no problems. Right, so node callback, we say callback, can't see that. And we exit the conversation, no transitions. Yeah, I really could have just copied one of these, couldn't have I? Okay, all of the data. Oh, all right, that's not good. Okay, so let's do something I should have done earlier. We need to initialize some variables here. So we'll be using storage variables and such as question 1, and then question 2, and question 3, and then the open feedback for each of the questions. Let's say Q1 feedback, Q2 feedback, Q3 feedback. Wait, I think that's probably all the storage variables we need. Obviously, I have written this app already, but I'm kind of starting back from scratch now. Written already, there's a tutorial up on the website that you can refer to if you don't like watching videos. And the link to it is in the description as well. Okay, so node callback, the next node we need to write is node question 1. We're not going to use the node yes and node no in this workflow, so let's just do this. We want to say for question 1, we need to create a phrase map for question 1, and then we need to transition to need to collect the rating into a rating Q1, and we need to transition to either question 1 negative if the rating is less than 6 or less, or question 1 or question 2 if it is 7 or better. Right, so this is the interesting part. Let's do this. Right, so node question 1. We need a phrase map for question 1. Let's create a phrase map. We might as well assume that we may come back to this phrase, so we need to do a repeat version of it. So question 1, and the question 1 is, perfect, thank you. First question, how would you rate the bank employees with whom you interacted? So we can just paste that here. Let's do our word wrap. And we don't really need any of this, right? Because we're not using any variables for name or otherwise. And here we need to, provide an optional text for when we come back to this node, if we come back to it from a digression, for example. So let's see. How would you rate the bank employees with whom you interacted on a scale of 0 to 10? I was saying, can you please rate the bank employees on the scale of 0 to 10? 0 to 10. Yeah, we want to actually use the word to here. Also, important, last but not least, when you create a phrase, you need to map it to a macro. So, like this. There we go. Now we've got a macro for question one. We've got question one, and we should be good. Node callback. Oh, there we go. For callback, we never mapped the macro, did we? Well, let's just do that. There we go. Beautiful. And good. So question one, we say question one, how would you rate your experience on the scale of 0 to 10? And then we need to define a transition. So the transition is, let's say Q1 evaluate. So what does this mean? We need to evaluate whether the rating is positive or negative. So to do that, let's just go to node Q1 evaluate on message has data. Okay, message has data rating. So this is us using the we're using a function of Dasha script, which is message has data, which means that we check for a specific data within the message. The Q1 evaluate is underlined because we don't have this node yet. So what does message has data mean? Let's go back to the data JSON. This is the really fun part, I suppose. So there we go. We've got some entities, named entities, and the first one is rating. Is it an open set? No, it's not. What does that mean? That means that if you say not like 99 instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's not going to substitute 99 for one of these values. It's going to ask you to provide a different type of rating. So we need to have this not just for a 1 through 5, we need to have it for 0 through 10. I've got this training data already in my other app, the one that I've already built. So I'm just going to copy and paste it because I don't feel like typing it out. That's a lot of typing. Let's check that everything is correct here. Right, there we go. So we've got values from 0 to 10. Yep, that looks pretty good. Where is our question? Question one, there it is. All right, so perfect. Next, where do we go from here? We go to node Q1 evaluate. So we need to write the node Q1 evaluate. It's probably the more interesting node because we're actually doing some calculations here. So before we start saying anything, we need to define some variables to store the or actually no, we already got these variables defined. So we need to utilize them to store the data that we collected in the previous node. Okay, all right. So there we go. Let's one thing I want to do is we did declare some storage variables, but I want to change their names to the same names that I used in the initially built version of this app. So we've done that. Now, what we need to do is we need to set the variable for Q1 rate as the value of the data that we have collected. I'm just going to copy and paste this here. So essentially, we're saying set this variable as the data which we have collected here, first value in the array, because the named entities are collected as arrays of strings. Next thing we do is we need to declare a new variable that is where we will store the integer of this value, because this value is stored as a string. So we use the function parse int rating rather Q1 rate. There we go. So now we've got a integer. Now we do a pretty simple if this integer is greater than or equal to 7, we go to transition question 2, else go to transition question. Sorry, what did I name it here? Question 1n. All right, so now we need to define the transitions. For transition question 2, go to node question 2. Yeah. For transition question 1n, go to node question 1 negative. So question 1 negative is what happens when we get a rating of 6 or below. It's telling us that we don't have a node question 2, which is okay because we'll create it a little bit later. But first, let's do question 1 negative. What do we do in this node? In this node, we ask a question. we say, sorry to hear your experience was less than optimal. What could have been done better? And that's going to be phrase question 1N. Then we wait. Let's add question 1N to the phrase map. I'm going to park this here for a second. Whoops. Okay, there we go. All right, there we go. Question 1N. And remember, we've got to add a, well, let's do this. Got to add a macro. The macros are probably going to be phased out in one of the later versions of Dasha script. All right, so once we say question 1, wait, we need to transition. So what we're trying to do in this node is we're trying to collect whatever data the user says back to us. So whatever they say, we want to store it. So how do we do that? There's a function for it. It's called I think get message text. So to get to that get message text, we need to there is the area of the function called on exit, and it lets us do all types of data operations as we exit the node. So we need to exit the node no matter what happens. So to do that, we define a transition as go to the next node on true, which means in the case that the user says absolutely anything at all. And as we exit, we want to collect the data that the user has read out to us. And we want to log it in the terminal so that you can be sure that you collected the correct data. So to do that, we set a value for Q1 feedback. There we go. That's our variable where we want to store the feedback. And we call up the external function console log. So we've got an external function here. Let's rename it for console log. That's what we'll use. Oh, sorry. So I'm actually we're supposed to specify on exit to which node we do what. So let's do this. That's better. All right, so there we go. So as we exit this node and go to the next node, which is Q1 and to Q2, so question 1 negative, transition to question 2, we will set the Q1 feedback variable as get message text. So we get the message, the text of everything that the user has said to us, and we call up the external function console log to print the contents of that message back out to us to make sure that it was collected correctly. So we're calling up the console log external function here. We've defined, initialized the external function here. Now we need to go to index.js, which is the file through which you interact with the Dasha SDK. And we need to actually add this external function here so that it can execute as the conversation goes along. So we're going to add it to the body of the big main function here. So let me see where I've got this. There it is. Put it here. And that should give us the printout that we're after. What's wrong here? Oh, question 1 is what's wrong. We don't have question 1 yet, so we'll get to it in just a second. We've got what we need to do now is node Q1 to Q1 and to Q2. What do we do here? So we've collected the variable, we've collected the feedback from the user. Now we want to say thanks and transition to the next. We could in theory just transition to the next question without saying thanks, but that wouldn't be very polite, I suppose. So what we would do instead is we would say something like a transition statement. And from that point, we would head straight out to the next node, which is, so the next transition to the next node, which is question 2. Transitions, question 2, go to question 2. There we go. So we need to define the text for the transition. Let me see what I used here. Right, I'm sorry you were unsatisfied. I will be sure to mark your feedback as escalated. This is definitely not supposed to be there. Where do we pop this in? Let's pop it in here. And add the macro. You do not go anywhere without the macro. Perfect. Okay, so let's make Dasha script happy. It's been asking us to give it a question 2 node for a while now. Let's do just that. So to give it a question 2 node, all we do is obviously copy question 1, change it to question 2, and add the text for question 2. So I'm just going to go in here and add all of this text as copy pasted because we've gone through this already. So the only difference is with question 3, what we'll do in question 3 is we will also ask a question if we get a good rating. We'll say, hey, what was so good about that rating? Can you tell me? So we'll say something like, you know what? Right, so we need question 2, question 2n, question 3, question 3n, and actually question 3p, question 3 positive. Yep, so I'm just going to copy and paste the nodes here as well, because we've gone through one of them. We've gone through the first question, and it's really pretty much the exact same thing for all the other questions. We've got the evaluate node. So for question 3, we've got the positive node, which is the same as the negative node. The only difference is instead of asking what was so bad about it, we ask what was so good about it. Then we've got Q3 to the final question. I will take you through the final question. So the final question is basically, oh, what's up with this? Oh, totally makes sense. Yep, final Q. Node final Q. What's so special about the final question? Nothing really. So we are asking, thank you so much. Anything else we should make note of, and collect open feedback. So we've already done this pretty much with asking for feedback about the negative experience that the user has had. So we use the say function, final Q. Yeah, you can't find the macro because we haven't added it here yet. Let's do that. I'm not gonna type this out. I'll just copy and paste. Right, there we go. And for the phrase map, we need the final question. And then we've got a final by, which is an exit node. So all we do is we say, okay, yeah, thank you so much for your time. And thank you for being a loyal customer. Take care and goodbye. Let's add this node in here. Very, very simple. So basically the same node that we had for call me back. All right. Okay. Final Q. What? No macro. True, true, true. We need to add the macro. And I think we need the macro for final by as well, don't we? Let's take a look. Final Q, final by. Nothing is highlighted red, which is very nice. And digression. So I've built here just one digression as an example, which is the digression, how are you? So if we identify intent, how are you? Like the user is asking the AI, how are you? Then we want to say, I'm good, and go back to the node from which we were taken into this digression. So for example, let's do another one. Who is this calling again? Who this, right? Node or digression, who is this? Generally, I will copy and paste these functions because why not? So on message has intent, who this, we want to say, for example, and here we're using the function say text, by the way. Just decided to do that as an example for you. So this way we don't have to go to the phrase map. We can straight up write the text that we want to say here. So let's say, who is this? This is Dasha, a virtual agent with Acme Credit Union. And then we go back to the node from which we were called down here. So we need the data for the who this digression. By the way, we don't have a how are you intent here either. So let's add that. Okay, so And how are you? How are you? How are you doing? How's it going? What is up? All right. We don't need those excludes here. And then we need one for who this, and this includes who is this? Who is calling? Yeah, I think we can make do for with just these for the example. All right. I think we've got everything we need here. We've got our external function. We've got all of our main.dsl, all the Dasha scripts. So let's try to run a test. PMI, just in case. We've got 2 highlights in the phrase map, so something it's unhappy about. Got 2 question 1 ends. Well, we only need 1. All right, so let's try npm start. Let's try a phone call. Oh yeah, we're gonna wait for a while for that. It's preparing, it's training the custom intents. So I'm just gonna pause the recording and restart it once the intents are trained. That the neural network training is happening right now. Okay, so we trained the intents.
Hi, this is Dasha with Acme Credit Union. You visited one of our offices earlier today. I'd like to ask you a few questions about the experience. Do you have 2 minutes now?
I do, yes.
Perfect. Thank you. First question, how would you rate the bank employees with whom you interacted on the scale of 0 to 10?
Oh, that wasn't supposed to happen. What on? Well, let's have a look. So it seems to have broken right on the first question. Question 1. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Instead of asking it to wait, I asked it to exit. That's horrible of me. Let's make sure that didn't happen elsewhere. Nope, everything else looks pretty good. Let's try it again. I guess if anything else is broken, we're gonna find out.
Dasha with Acme Credit Union. You visited one of our offices earlier today. I'd like to ask you a few questions about the experience. Do you have 2 minutes now?
I do.
These with whom you interacted on the scale of 0 to 10.
Very good.
Sorry, the connection dropped for a second. Could you say that again?
Very good.
Thank you. Next question. On a scale of 0 to 10, how did you feel about the effectiveness of the anti-COVID measures at the bank location?
I would give it a 6.
So sorry to hear that you thought our measures are not sufficient. What do you think can be done better?
More sanitizer.
I'm so sorry, we're satisfied. I will be sure to mark your feedback as escalated. Thank you. And final question, how would you rate the overall experience on a scale of 0 to 10?
8.
Thank you for such a high rating of your experience. Can you please share what especially stood out?
Delicious cookies.
Thank you so much. Anything else we should make note of?
Nope, that's it.
Thank you so much for your time and for remaining a loyal Acme customer. Your feedback will help us serve you better. Bye.
Bye. And there we go. Your first conversational app. Maybe it's not your first, but there it is. Either way. The source code for this is in the description to the video. There's also a link to a written typed tutorial if that's going to be better for you. And thank you so much for watching, and expect to get more of these tutorials, and I promise they're going to get better with time. This was my first rodeo. Thanks, guys. Bye.